AU should take an interest in this issue because it has the potential to wreck everything that we have worked for: African solidarity, African integration, and all that. And so we sent a notice that we wanted to put it on the agenda for the AU meeting that was supposed to take place in Egypt. Unfortunately, that meeting was postponed. Yeah, but we're hoping that at the next opportunity, we will be able to put it on the agenda. President Ramaphosa sent a delegation to me yesterday. We met with them. And I explained the reason why it was important for us to discuss it.
All right, welcome to This Week in Ghana, your bi-weekly live stream where we talk about all the Ghana news. As you can see, Ghana finally has held talks with South Africa about the Afrophobic/xenophobic attacks. We have some other stories to go over with you in terms of updates on funding for flooding and Ghana's GDP and what's been happening with the economy in Ghana. There is a major change to the school system in Ghana, specifically kindergarten, in terms of language learning and around Chinese. And lastly, we're going to talk about what's happened with No.1 Oxford Street, a very popular building in Ghana, and the news surrounding that. But before we get into today's news, we'd like to start with introductions. So I'll turn it over to our co-host to introduce herself before I introduce myself.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Ivy Prosper, and I am the founder of my company, Prosper Creative Group, and I am also a producer and a YouTube creator, and telling stories from Ghana and from Africa to the world. I am a published author of the book, Your Essential Guide on Moving to Ghana, which is available on Amazon. I was the first person to publish a book about moving to Ghana, and you can get it on Amazon, as I said. And I am also available for consultations about Ghana, and I also do some work as an MC and as a moderator at events.
All right, and apologies for the background noise. I am at a work retreat at a golf course, so apologize for the top 40 American news hits that you hear on the radio behind me. I am Joe Hatagwa. I am the founder of Authentic African Media. We help people visit, move, and invest on the continent of Africa. Our goal is to share the information, share with you the news of the day that is happening on the continent, so you are familiar with the places that you're planning to visit, move, and potentially invest in. As we stated, President Mahama of Ghana has revealed that he was firm with representatives of South African government during a recent engagement, insisting that xenophobic attacks against African citizens must be discussed at the level of the African Union. Mahama said that the matter could not be ignored or swept under the carpet, stressing the need for a continental approach to address concerns affecting Africans living across the continent. So his comments come as the African Union Commission condemns the attacks and signals plans to table the issue for discussion at its next Heads of State and Government Summit. So, Ivy, your thoughts on the meeting that happened and the escalation to the African Union?
Well, I do think that it's important for the African Union to get involved in this discussion because the African Union is all about unity of the continent of Africa. And so they are supposed to be an authority when it comes to matters that are about uniting each of the countries. I also think that not only about South Africa being an important discussion, because the fact is the issues happening in South Africa have gotten a lot of media attention and a lot of people have been talking about it. And the violence that's been incited by a group of individuals. It's not everyone who's participating in this, but there are groups of individuals who are doing this and it's becoming escalated. And so what I do know is not only in South Africa, as I was saying, there are other places that you go and this type of sentiment does happen where you hear about people who are saying they don't want certain people to come and take jobs, even though that's not necessarily what's happening. We've seen it that even within the brotherly love between Ghana and Nigeria, you'll see some Ghanaians who will say that there are some Nigerians coming and taking jobs. And then in Nigeria, same thing about Ghanaians coming, taking jobs. You hear these types of sentiments happening often. And so I think that the African Union does need to take it seriously, because it is something that we have to make sure that we address, so that, you know, people across the continent aren't behaving this way towards each other and are seeing that, you know, just the same way that an African leaves and goes to the US and leaves and goes to the UK or somewhere in Europe to go and find work. What is the issue with an African going to another African country? The fact that they're choosing another African country over going to somewhere outside the continent, I think, is a nice thing. It's a beautiful thing that they're going to see another African country as a place of opportunity and learning and integration and that type of thing. So I think that it's good that he's raised this conversation at the level of the African Union.
Absolutely. And I will say many people have asked, you know, what is the role of the African Union, right? I've heard people ask this so many times, right? Because you hear about other unions, like the European Union, for example, and how there's freedom of movement across the continent of Europe, and how they operate under one currency and a number of different things that they do. And it seems like the African Union, for many people, has not met that kind of a standard. And so what I see with President Mahama is that he's fully utilizing that body the way it should be, you know, most recently with the reparations discussion and the gravest crime against humanity in terms of the transatlantic slave trade, starting there and then moving to the UN. And now, of course, in this instance, as it pertains to the relations between the two countries, I absolutely agree that it's important to bring this to that level, because we need to talk through solutions, diplomatic and from a high level, right? Neutral parties, et cetera. And to your point, this is something you see in many countries. There's this issue with immigrants generally, right? Anywhere around the world, the people who are inhabiting that country as immigrants come in, because I can't even say indigenous people, because in the United States, these aren't indigenous people who have issues with immigrants or migrants. But you find this in many places. But when it leads to violence, you know, people experiencing loss of life, and also the sentiment goes beyond illegal migration, but into those who migrated through the means that are allotted to them by the government and who are employing people. What you're finding is that there are some people in these conversations asking those people who have those businesses to leave, and then asking to then just turn those businesses over to folks who just happen to be in the general proximity. I know this isn't all of South Africa, but I do understand that this is definitely, it's reached a level where it's important that it does get outside attention from a larger governing body. I don't think this is something that should just be between two countries, especially because multiple countries are impacted by this in South Africa. I read somewhere that over 12, maybe even 20,000 people have now been repatriated into their countries of origin because of that June 30th deadline. Obviously there was some violence to some, and there's been many conversations about, how this was handled. And I do think that it makes sense to have a larger governing body step in and do some diplomatic work here. And I do think that, the conversation that Mahama had, or President Mahama had with Ramaphosa's team, was an important one to express that, this does need to be escalated, and it does need more work from senior leadership within that country. One thing that I'm reading about is that there are parliamentarians who are running for local offices, and I've mentioned this previously, who are flaming what is it called? But fanning the flames of these Afrophobic attacks. because they know that it's popular amongst some of the voting public, much in the same way that you see it in other countries. The unfortunate part is that, you know, these countries were all carved up by Europeans, and people are fighting so hard to keep borders by people from people who don't have your best interest at heart. In any case, we will continue to follow the story. I think I'm glad that they had this meeting because last week or 2 weeks ago, we reported that the meeting had been postponed, at least publicly stated. So we're glad to see that the meetings had started. Now they were behind closed doors. You know, meetings between heads of state a lot of times have press conferences and things of that nature. But because they wanted to ease the tensions, they had these conversations behind closed doors. But I'm glad that President Mahama came out and expressed what he discussed. He didn't mince words. And so I think that was a really important way to communicate what needs to be done. Okay, so now on to the next story. Some weeks back, we had reported on the flooding that had been happening across Accra, and not just Accra, but other parts of Ghana. And, you know, there was a massive storm that dropped roughly 140 millimeters of rain in just a few hours. And that actually triggered an unprecedented flash flood across the greater Accra region and the coastal communities. So the extreme weather caused at least 12 confirmed fatalities, and emergency crews from Ghana National Fire Service, police, and military were forced to carry out high-risk operations to rescue over 470 trapped citizens. So there's a ton of infrastructure destruction. Extensive segments of the national road network were rendered completely impassable. The flood severely compromised public infrastructure, destroyed commercial businesses, and forced thousands of households to evacuate to higher ground. In terms of the economic cost, some estimate in the hundreds of millions of cedis. And so the government has put a relief program in place. We will play a little bit from the this discussion and on the floor of the of the parliament, and then we will have some commentary on the other side.
To present the mid-year fiscal policy review of the 2026 budget and economic policy of government. So, Speaker, before I proceed with this mid-year fiscal policy review, I wish to acknowledge the devastating floods that struck parts of our country last month. Right Honorable Speaker, as honorable members will recall, the floods claimed lives, displaced families, destroyed businesses, and caused extensive damage to public infrastructure. Ghana was not alone. Similar floods also affected Nigeria, Côte d'Ivoire, and Sierra Leone, highlighting the growing flood risk across West African coastline and the effect of climate change. Mr. Speaker, government responded swiftly by visiting the hardest hit communities, releasing funds for emergency relief, and launching a nationwide cleanup exercise. On the direction of His Excellency the President, I am making available additional resources for ongoing dredging and construction of critical drains in the affected areas. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President has directed the Ministry of Works, Housing and Water Resources to develop a comprehensive and permanent solution to flooding in Accra and other flood-prone areas across the country. The necessary funding for the implementation of this permanent solution will be provided in the 2027 budget and the medium term. Mr. Speaker, I stand before this House with a deep sense of pride and confidence, born out of strong performance in the last 1.5 years in the management of the Ghanaian economy.
All right, so I'll leave it there. A couple things that I read in terms of what was allocated in terms of funding, and I want to make sure I get this right so that I can share because we didn't hear it in that video. but there was a $226 million mitigation injection, $350 million emergency, 226 million Ghana cedi mitigation injection, and a 350 million Ghana cedi emergency transfer. So that is over close to over 600 million Ghana cedis in aid that went to working to try to mitigate and or emergency relief for the aftermath of this terrible flood. Ivy, your thoughts on the ongoing flood challenges and the budgets that were put towards trying to correct this and solve for the damage?
I have to be quite honest when I say that I'll believe it when I see it, because every year there's flooding that happens, there's serious damage to people's homes and property and businesses. I mean, this one was one of the biggest effects because there were places that don't normally flood that actually flooded this time around. And so I honestly kind of have lost faith in the upper powers actually doing something. I'm seeing that organization, the Bus Stop Boys, do a lot when it comes to discussing some of the potential solutions. And then there's that other page, I'm trying to remember the name of the page, but there's a woman who does videos where she talks about possible solutions in Ghana when it comes to infrastructure and the cause of flooding. And she talks about the wetlands. And there's so many different things that I've seen. I saw a map that showed, not from her page, but from another, that it showed where the wetlands in Accra were. It was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and now, and it showed how the wetland area has been shrinking and people have been building and slowly creeping on these wetlands. So it's a combination of government and the behavior of the citizens and behavior of the developers. Because if you are a citizen and you know that this particular land shouldn't be built on, don't buy in that area. And developers, why are you selling in these areas? And sometimes it's not necessarily even them. Sometimes it's just people who are opportunists and they think they can just sell to unknowing people. And it causes a whole series of issues. So I think that enforcement of regulations, enforcement of laws need to happen, making sure that if you are denying people a permit to build, you have to enforce it. And don't let someone bribe you to just still keep building. Because we see around Ghana all the time, you'll see somebody has spray painted, remove, do not build, tear down, get your documents from TMA, prove that you are supposed to build here. And it's like, I hear stories about people who are not supposed to, but they still go ahead. So I don't know. I kind of have lost faith in it. And I feel like it's an ongoing discussion that there are solutions, but nothing's happening. So this budget being allocated, we can put it on paper, they can put on paper that's being allocated, but until I actually see the action being taken, I don't have any trust, to be honest.
And that's fair. I mean, you've seen it year after year, right? As a double returnee, and we've talked about how long you've been in country. So if anybody has seen these changes over the years, or the changes in climate, but not changes in political action, I can understand your skepticism. And look, I would like to know how this budget is going to be allocated and towards what. To your point, there are a multitude of issues causing these floods. As you mentioned, there needs to be more enforcement of where people can buy and build. There needs to be better city planning. There needs to be more cleanup of the gutters, right? All of those have to happen in conjunction with each other, along with also understanding that there needs to be more of a cultural change around building on your property, right? Everybody's building giant cement slabs around their properties, and there's nowhere for the water to go. There's no soaking of the water into the ground. in, you know, the greater Accra region, at least from most of the houses that I visited and all the Airbnbs that I've stayed in. At this point, I can't even tell you how many there have been. But in my, you know, 7 years now going to Ghana, every single place that I've stayed, there's maybe been one place that I've seen that's had like grassy areas on the property. It's very uncommon these days to see that. And so, you know, obviously that's going to take a change in the way people see things and make some adjustments there. But then all the other things, the enforcement is going to be really important, as well as trying to mitigate this damage in the future. And I don't know what that budget can be allocated towards to ensure that they do that. So we'll watch and see, and we will continue to keep you all posted. And again, this just goes back to the fact that any of you who are thinking about getting into real estate on the continent, specifically in Ghana, the rainy season is when you should be visiting. At this very moment right now, throughout the rainy season, you should be visiting and looking at where you're thinking about buying, so you can have an idea of how you would be impacted by the rains. Because without that, you'll have no idea what the impact will be on your property if you are in the process of buying. All right. Now, to shift gears, we are moving towards education in Ghana. The Education Ministry revised the national curriculum, making Chinese an additional language to learn. I thought this was really interesting, being that, you know, in many countries around the world, right, you have kind of English is a pretty common language that most people are required to learn, and at many different schools around the world. And as we know, you know, China has been growing in its popularity on the continent, in its soft power, in its business relationships. And if you know, how many China malls have I seen in Accra, right? At least 2 that I know of. And so, you know, obviously the foreign national Chinese are prevalent in country. And so I think I would imagine it makes sense to start to think about that. And, you know, there are many people who go to school to learn in China. I had a coworker who went to university in China, and he actually spoke Chinese. And so when we had Chinese investors coming in or Chinese clients coming in, he was able to communicate with them. And that became a point of trust for them to do business with us at that time. And there are other folks that we're all familiar with who have spent time going to university in China. So it seems to make sense. It never crossed my mind that this would be something that'd be offered. So with that, let's get into a story from News 360 where they kind of speak to this, and then we will have some commentary on the other side.
There's no sound.
Okay, let me see if I can fix that. Sorry, guys. Let me see if I can stop sharing and try it again. You know, from time to time, this happens. Apologies. Technology. Let's try this again. Sound is on, but sometimes the sound does not play. Let's try this again.
The Ministry of Education
How about now? Can you hear the sound?
Revised national curriculum that makes the teaching of foreign languages compulsory from kindergarten to primary 3 and introduces Chinese as an additional language to be taught in schools. The government says the policy is aimed at improving pupils' understanding of lessons, boosting literacy, and enhancing critical thinking at the foundational level.
For decades, education stakeholders have debated the language of instruction at Ghana's basic education level. The differing views have continued to shape discussions on education policy and curriculum development. Following stakeholder engagements, The Ministry of Education tasked the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, NACA, to review the basic school curriculum to better respond to the country's educational needs. The review has now been completed, introducing several reforms, including the compulsory use of Ghanaian languages as the medium of instruction from kindergarten to primary school. The revised curriculum also recommends the introduction of additional foreign languages, including Chinese and French, to broaden students' global competency. The Director General of NACA, Professor Samuel Bequin, says the review is intended to strengthen foundational learning and prepare pupils for a more competitive global environment.
All right, I think we'll leave it there. But I think one of the more important things that I heard there, and I thought that this was important, was that teaching local Ghanaian languages as compulsory and a requirement. Many times you hear around the continent that there are children that fall behind in their learnings because they're required to learn in a secondary language, like English, for example. And so if you're learning, and this is not just in Ghana, this is around the continent of Africa. If you're learning in your native language, you're more likely, obviously, to pick it up than you're trying to translate, then learn. That makes things so much more difficult to learn. And especially for those who have learning disabilities, and there's not a lot of one-on-one attention paid to students, especially on the continent, right? So you already have folks that might have learning disabilities or challenges with electricity, and then you have to try to learn in a language that is not your native language. So I thought that was really important. That's probably the more important piece. And then an elective, is now also added as Chinese. But your thoughts, Ivy, I'd love to hear from you on this one.
Well, I think that it's good that the local language being mandatory, that they need to learn a local language, is very important that they're doing that. Because I know there was a time when some people were talking about having gone to school in Ghana, and people have said to me that they weren't allowed to speak a local language and they would get in trouble if they spoke a local language. They were told they had to always speak English. So the fact that they're saying that it's mandatory to learn in a local language, I think it's a good thing. And as you said, it's helpful when someone can learn in what they're most comfortable with instead of trying to translate in order to learn. So I think that's good. Now, as far as the Chinese, and I think also Arabic, they've been added as optional languages. I think it's important for people to know that they're added as optional, because some of the headlines give this misleading thing, make it seem like it's mandatory that they take Chinese or take Arabic. It is optional in the schools. And I think that is something that has happened because of the fact that there are so many Chinese doing business in Ghana, that it's kind of become something that they're seeing as potentially would be good for business when they get older. And if they understand this language, it'll help them when they're conducting business. And we know that Chinese are all over the continent of Africa. And what we're seeing, as you said earlier, we're seeing stores open up, signage everywhere that's in Chinese, which, I mean, when the Chinese go to other countries, they do this a lot, where they create their own communities. They have their signage in their own language. Like in Toronto, there's an area that's called Chinatown, where a lot of Chinese are, and they have a lot of Chinese businesses. Things are written in the Chinese language. And so it's not surprising that this is happening here now. I just hope that it doesn't get to a situation where they end up making it become a priority over the local language. I think that keeping it optional is something that can help them internationally if they're looking to do business, export, import once they get older and stuff like that. So there are some positives and some negatives to it, but it does show that China is gaining a stronger foothold in the continent of Africa. That is the biggest thing that I see as a takeaway from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, soft power and business has really been how they've done it, and it has been a very successful campaign. A couple of different things, just anecdotally, I have a friend who is Ga and was born and raised in Accra, but doesn't speak Tree. And I was shocked by that. And what they expressed to me was that they were taught in English in school. And so she speaks her local language of Ga, right? But she doesn't speak Tree. And I mean, I guess that's not uncommon. But I know it's the most, if I'm not mistaken, it's the most spoken language in country. And so that to me, I thought was interesting as someone who's gone all the way through school, who lived, I mean, obviously, the Ga are the people who settled in Accra long before others, or at least in the more recent history, as far as I understand. But you would still expect that as the most common language spoken, that most people would know it, especially those who've gone through school. And I was shocked to find out that she knows very few words. She says like 30% of what she hears, she knows, only because she's heard it enough times, like kind of living in Accra. So I thought that was interesting, just that anecdotal piece of insight. So yeah, I think it is important to learn in your local language and learn other local languages in school. And then to the point about learning Chinese, I do think that it's inevitable, right? You have a multipolar world, and the two major powers are English and Chinese, or the English-speaking countries and the Chinese-speaking countries. I did hear that French is another elective that was already in place, or I don't know if it was added, but obviously Ghana is neighbored by French-speaking individuals on all three sides, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, it makes sense that, you have tribes that were split, right? And, in one part of a country, they'll speak French, and on the other side, they'll speak English. So I do think learning French probably would be useful in the sense of just maybe communicating with countries to your east, west, or north. And of course, learning Chinese I guess it's just an inevitable fact. So,
to your point about being surprised about the person not speaking Chi, that doesn't surprise me at all. Even though Chi is one of the most spoken Ghanaian languages, it doesn't surprise me because we are in Greater Accra, which, as you said, is settled by the Ga people, and the Ga people are a very proud people with their language. And if they're learning in school and they're learning English, because you were saying this person said they learned in English. Then why would you expect them to know Chi? Because when they go home, their family's going to be speaking Ga, not Chi, right? Right?
Yeah, and so that was interesting to me. When she told me, she was like, yeah, in school we were taught in English. And that, I think, furthers this discussion, right, where you have to learn in local languages. And obviously she speaks great English. She speaks two languages very well. And I guess that was helpful and useful to communicate with people who come in and out of country, and for work for her. It's been helpful. But
and there's a lot of Ghanaians who speak French. They learn to speak French. A lot of Ghanaians who learn to speak French because of what you said, being surrounded by French-speaking countries.
Right. Which makes sense. Okay, so we'll move on now to the final story. Actually, there's two more stories, but the last video to review. And this is on Nana Kwame's No.1 Oxford Street Hotel, apparently surrounded by police after a court-issued warrant. We're going to play this video from TV3 Ghana and have some commentary on the other side. Let me know if you guys can get the audio on this. I know that the sound has been a bit disruptive today.
Coming up next, and I'm sure this is a story that a number of you have been reacting. We've taken a trip to this location to confirm a few things. That's what's coming up next. The Commercial Division of the High Court in Accra on July 21, that is a couple of days ago, granted a warrant of police assistance to a UK-based company and its appointed receiver. And we're talking about this No.1 Oxford Street building. Now, this building in question belongs to Cheddar. And for the many of you who have been reacting to the story, is because of the person in question and how all of this is playing out. Tonight, what we can confirm to you is that there's heavy police presence at this said location. And this is how it looks like as we speak. These are live videos from the No.1 Oxford Street, that building, in execution of the Accra Division, the High Court Commercial Division's grant of a warrant of police assistance to the UK-based company and its appointed receiver in Ghana, Ni Amanododu, to take possession of the huge, aesthetic, and imposing white building located next to the Dankwa Circle at Osuhia in Accra. The order made by Justice Samuel Johnson on July 21 followed an application by Kohler Holdings and the receiver after they informed the court that they had been unable to obtain possession of the property, this property, peacefully. Now, according to the court order, Kensington Residential Partners Limited opposed the application through one of its directors, Nana Kwame Bediakon, also known as Cheddar.
All right, we'll leave it there. Now, I do want to maybe defer to Ivy on some background on who Cheddar is and a little bit about the No.1 Oxford Street. But you saw in that video there, No.1 Oxford Street, they said a large, imposing building. It is a building that you can see from many areas in Accra. It lights up at night. It's a known building. And so it was surprising to me to hear this story when Ivy and I spoke about it last week. But Ivy, do you want to maybe give some background on Cheddar, just so everyone is aware of who he is? I think the name Cheddar, people might have heard, but it might be helpful for the people to kind of have a little bit of background on who he is as a presidential hopeful, etc. And then we can get back into the details of the story if you'd like to speak about it as well.
Well, he is a real estate developer, an entrepreneur, and he ran for president of Ghana in the last election. And he's somebody who's been in the media for a lot of his life in Ghana. I believe he worked in the entertainment business for a bit before he got into the real estate development. And he has a company called, I think it's a Corlays Group. So he actually owns two apartment hotels, which one is 1 Oxford Square and the other one is called Corlays. And people often have questioned how he's made his money. Some people question the legitimacy of how he's made his money. Some people don't trust him. His political party that he ran in was called the New Force. So he was calling it the New Force movement to make change in politics when he ran for office. But with the questioning of how he earns his income, there's often people investigating and trying to figure out, what his holdings are and how he got it and everything. And he also started calling himself Freedom Jacob Caesar. He started calling himself that. He got in trouble for having, I think he had tigers as pets, and he got in trouble for that at a point a few years ago. But in any case, the building at 1 Oxford Square right now, I passed the area the other night and it was dark because it has those bright lights on that building. So you could see it from anywhere in Osu. If you're like, on the top of a building and you see the view of it, you usually can see it from most places, but it was dark. So all the lights have been shut off. So if anybody was in there, nobody's in the building anymore. It's pure darkness there. So definitely something has happened. And it's kind of hard to get an understanding of all the details of everything because it's like a court injunction, and his team, I read that they were denying that anything was happening. But the fact that the lights are out and nobody's there, the gates are locked, just shows that something did in fact happen. So this is a big deal because it is an apartment hotel that is a core place that travelers visit and stay over the holidays. There are holidays when they visit Ghana. So I almost wonder, people may have booked who were supposed to be there and now they have to find other accommodations now that it's not in operation at the moment, temporarily. Whether it's temporary or permanent, I don't know. But right now, as of now, it's not operating. It's closed.
Yeah, and then I'll add, I think the way I read the court case was Cheddar and his business went into business with another group, and they had taken a loan out, and according to the other group that had wanted to seize the property, they said that they had been paying that loan and Cheddar and his company had not been. That's what they are alleging. And so because of this, they'd like to seize it. And so that was the high court that they had gone to get an injunction, or I guess it was an injunction, in order to seize the property from Cheddar and his business. There was initial reports that, as mentioned, that it was seized. And as of the 23rd, this reporting we just watched spoke about the 21st. As of the 23rd, we saw that the team for Cheddar and says that it had No.1 Oxford Street Hotel had not been seized and remained under their control. They rejected the reports that the facility had been taken over by the receiver appointed by the Cola Holdings Limited, insisting that the hotel remained under their control and the possession of its management of directors. So that's the statement they issued last Thursday. But, obviously this is a concerning issue for a potential presidential hopeful, or for anybody who is, operating within the country. So I'm interested to see what the reporting bears out and what actually happened here. That'll help answer some questions for us. But until then, we'll keep you guys posted on what we hear, if there are any additional updates on this. All right, and so moving on to the last and final story. As of, I don't even have the date on this, but there's a public alert on restaurant and food vendor impersonation scams. I haven't had much time to look into this. I know this was something that's recent, but between January and June of this year, the Cybersecurity Authority recorded 112 cases from vendors. Wow. And customers up from 61 over the same period last year, with financial losses rising from 85,000 Ghana cedis to over 296,000 Ghana cedis. So the CSA is actually tracking a growing scam in which cyber criminals create and, in some cases, alter the contact details of legitimate restaurants and food vendors on Google Search, Google Maps, and online platforms to trick unsuspecting customers. So that means, like, if you're using like Uber Eats, or if you're using Bolt Food and you think you're ordering from a restaurant, you pay your money through mobile money and your food never gets delivered, this is what we're talking about. I've actually gone through this before myself. I presumed it was the third-party payment platform. I was never really sure. And so if I'm not mistaken, I was given a credit. But yeah, Ivy, if you have any thoughts on this and what you've heard in regards to this particular issue.
Yeah, so this has been an ongoing issue, and so that's why the cybersecurity of the police department have put out this statement, because what's happening is when you go on Google, there's a lot of times when you can actually make edits to things online. The public can go and make edits to things. Even like Wikipedia, people will go and make edits to a Wikipedia page. So people find a way to make an edit to a phone number. So when you Google search a restaurant and the phone number pops up, and then you're like, oh, this is the number. So then you call, thinking you're calling the restaurant to place an order and have a delivery, but you're actually calling the fraudster who put their number there. And then you place an order with the fraudster, thinking you're getting your food order. And then you make payment to the fraudster, and then you're waiting for your food, and then your food never comes. And you're like, what happened? And so this is happening quite a bit, where people are also creating fake pages even, whether it's on Instagram, they create a fake page for the restaurant. They can buy a whole bunch of bots to make it look like they have a lot of people following it. They have a fake WhatsApp number there, fake information, and then people are ordering food, thinking they're going to get this food, and then they end up making a payment to someone who's not the person, who's not the actual restaurant. So that's been happening quite often, and they're cracking down on it and telling people to be careful, be cautious of who you're sending your payments to when you're doing that. It feels like the most secure is when you do it directly in the Bolt app, because in Ghana they have Bolt Food. There's no Uber Eats in Ghana, so Bolt Food, when you place your order, all those vendors have been officially put onto the Bolt app. Just make sure you've actually downloaded the correct official app when you're placing your order, because the Bolt Food app will actually connect directly to your Bolt app for when you're requesting rides, because you'll even find sometimes if there's a refund or if you made an overpayment, they put it into your Bolt account. So then when you order a ride, they actually put the balance towards your next ride. So making sure to be cautious about when you're placing orders, to make sure it's the right website, the right place, so that you don't have this happen to you. So that's what's been happening in Ghana over the last little while. That's made the cybersecurity unit put out this statement.
Yeah, and I'm seeing here there were a couple of different ways that this was done. As you mentioned, Google search and just changing the number. And then also some people were actually buying Google search results. So, basically, when you go do a Google search, you have the natural results, and then you have the paid and the sponsored links at the top.
The sponsored ones, yeah.
So this was saying that, yeah, sometimes the people were just doing the sponsored links. And then the other thing is, not every restaurant knows that they should add themselves to a Google profile. And so this was also stating that some people were going in and claiming people's Google profiles on their behalf, unclaimed Google profiles, and doing that as well. So to your point, I guess the Bolt Food app is one of the more verifiable platforms where you can ensure that it is the right company. What this mentions is like to verify through, so there was a statement released by the CSA, by the way, or at least the Ghana Security Authority, yes. And in the public statement, they said verify the restaurant or food vendor contact details through the official websites, verified social media pages, or trusted food delivery platforms. It sounds like the third of those options is really the only way, because some of the other ways, unless you go to the website, actually, if you're looking on Google and you see it, if you go to the website, if they have a website, and seems like the only way to really verify it is to use the Bolt Food app or another food app. I know Jumia Food is no longer in existence, so you're limited to different food app options. They said confirm payment instructions directly with the restaurant or the vendor using independently verified contact details. One thing that they always say is never share your mobile money PIN, your one-time password, banking credentials, or other personal information on any website with any individual. Be cautious of payment requests through unfamiliar links. So, this statement does have some, not just a notice to the public, but also some instructions, which I think is useful and helpful. And so, yeah, there's quite a bit here. I guess maybe I should have put that on the screen, but it's for public consumption. So I'm sure if you Google it, you'll find it. Any final words on this story or anything we talked about today?
No, just, it's always important to keep up with the news in Ghana, especially if you are planning to make a move to Ghana, or even if you're visiting the long term. It's always a good idea to understand the lay of the land and what's happening in the country, because it helps you to better understand the society. It helps you to take precautions necessary for things. It also helps you in some of your decision making, and just like I said, the overall understanding of the nation when you know the news, the politics, the ins and outs of what's happening in the country. We didn't have much engagement today, did we? I didn't see any comments being popped up on the screen.
A few, a few comments, but not as much as usual. I would say that today folks watched but didn't comment. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you all on these stories, and maybe I'll be more proactive and ask you all who are watching to let us know your thoughts as we go along. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Ivy's channel. Sorry, I keep looking off to the left. I'm being summoned. Make sure you subscribe to Ivy's channel and follow her on all platforms. You can at Ivy Prosper. You can also follow Authentic African on Instagram and all the other platforms as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube so you are up to date on all the news of the day. And yeah, we want to, also one last thing I'll mention. This is the last week for the Winter Holiday to Ghana contest that I am doing with Ito. So as of the 31st, which is Friday, that is when all entries are closed. So if you're interested in a trip to Accra, you can go to ito.authenticafrican.com to sign up. With that, we will see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching. See you guys on the next live stream. Bye, guys.
Bye for now.